I'm giving God my list of demands because, like, God, I'm a mom. I can't be cranky and grumpy and tired.
There's nothing like experiencing the relational God moving today in the real world.
Do you know armadillos have really poor eyesight?
And they're leprosy carriers? I didn't know that.
Do not test the Lord your God. Well, God, this is a test for you. I'm going to need you to come through for me here. I even was like listening to stop smoking podcasts, like hypnosis stuff. I tell you, I tried everything.
Cheers.
Cheers. The Lord is at hand.
Holy Spirit, fill this room. Be with us today. In your name, amen.
Amen. I'm going to figure out what's the most comfortable way for me to sit. Probably like this. Are you recording right now? Mm-hmm. Oh. Awesome. Thanks for the heads up. There we go. This is pretty comfortable. Awesome. This
is episode 3 of The Lord is at Hand. I am Mikey, and we are here in Ashley's house. Ashley is my wonderful cousin. And Ashley and her husband Miguel and her 3-year-old Santi and her pregnant baby Javi.
My baby is not pregnant. I am pregnant with a baby.
That's an important distinction. Have welcomed me into their home, and it's been really fun. Today, we're going to talk about journeys to Jesus because you and I have kind of been on similar timelines.
Unbeknownst to each other.
Yeah.
Until fairly recently.
And then now we've come together and we're supporting each other and we're reading the Bible together.
Yeah.
Bible studying. So you shared with me a really cool story that I want us to get into about how you needed help with something and the Lord helped you with something.
The Lord was at hand.
And that was a sign for you that really helped you take that step. But I want us to do some context, and we've been having some chats the last few days. So could you maybe just tell me, Ashley, a little bit about your background in the church, your first and earliest experiences?
Well, I was raised in church, like Mikey and his family. Our families are very strongly rooted in their faith. We both were always surrounded by God and love and prayer, and it was just kind of part of life, and I never thought much about it.
Can I stop you there, though? Because we were talking last night, and y'all went to what is known as a charismatic church?
Yes, an Assemblies of God church.
We did not grow up at a charismatic church. I learned last night what slain by the Spirit is.
Yeah.
Can you explain what being slain by the Spirit is?
It happens a lot at, churches like the Assemblies of God Church, Church of God, Pentecostal churches, all of those very charismatic churches where if it is an authentic slaying in the Spirit, it's typically somebody's praying for you or over you, and you're so overcome by the Spirit of God that you're just like knocked out and you fall down and you wake up, minutes or even hours later in some people's case. I don't know if I should go into the authenticity or lack thereof, but we can talk about that a little bit more later.
Yeah, I want to get into your experience because, we're starting with how you got into the church and how you were exposed, but I think we should also, before we go further, you kind of got away from that. You were really turned off from the church for a long time to the point where, you would tell your mom, don't pray for me.
Yeah.
It got to that point.
Yeah.
And so even hearing you guys talk last night, it was crazy hearing your different perspectives, you know, because Michelle was talking the slain by the Spirit and all this stuff. And you were the real ones maybe, but and they're pushing you and
Yeah. So I think, like I was saying before, we were raised in church. We were always surrounded by it. It was part of life. And as I got older, I really started getting more involved myself, not just as a churchgoer, but getting involved in leadership. And I am a singer. And so I was always involved in church worship, from children's church all the way through to what we called big church. So I was on the worship team. I led worship in our youth group. When I was 13, my parents split up and got divorced when I was 14, and that was kind of the start of my distancing myself from the church a little bit because, I had grown up in it. They were my church family. We were in church at least 3 times a week, if not 4 or 5 times a week, because in a charismatic church, you've got church on Sunday morning, then Sunday night service, then Wednesday night service. And if you're in any kind of leadership, you're preparing for a mission trip, whatever it may be, then you're going additional nights during the week. So I was there almost every day. And these people who I called my family, not all of them, but some of them really started to turn their backs on our family because of my parents' split. And I don't want to get into too much detail about that because that's more my mom's story than mine, but it was really difficult because these people made us feel like outcasts when we were like the inner circle, if you will. And my whole life I'd been told, like, we've got to be Jesus to others, we've got to love others, and then I was experiencing this. So there was this major like cognitive dissonance that I was experiencing at a young age, at a really pivotal age, I think, being in late middle school, early high school. I mean, so much of your whole life view is based on those years. But I still stayed really involved. I was still part of leadership. And as I got older, there were just things that would happen, whether it would be, you know, we were talking about like the slaying in the spirit, for example, or speaking in tongues, like the really overt showing of faith or worship of God was at some points like being pushed upon us, both literally and figuratively.
Tell me that story of the lady who was like asking you to speak in tongues.
Yeah, so, and it's crazy because I haven't talked about speaking in tongues in years just because it almost feels shameful to me in a way because of this experience that I had at church where there was a lady who was praying over me, and I don't remember what it was for, but she told me to speak in tongues, like let the Holy Spirit fill you and speak in tongues. And I was just praying. I wasn't in that space. And she just got more and more forceful to the point where she was like yelling at me to speak in tongues. I remember leaving that experience feeling almost like violated by that. I think since then that has never felt the same for me. And there were many experiences like that where, you know, you're in church and you're being prayed over and some guy, some deacon at the front is like physically pushing you down, trying to make you slain in the spirit. And you're like, hang on a second, what is going on here? So that's why I mentioned the authenticity piece at the beginning, because I know that there are people that have truly experienced these things and are very genuine in their faith and they're genuine in their displays of that faith. But I think the reverse side of that is that there are so many people who are abusing it and using it as an emotional manipulation for people. And that is a really dangerous thing because it can not only turn off potential followers, but existing followers. And that's what happened to me. And these things just kind of added up for me over time. And recently we were in church at our current church. And I remember Pastor Randy Bizet, shout out Pastor Randy, said, if you've got a problem with the church, it's typically a people problem, not a God problem. And that resonated so much for me because I feel like that's exactly what I was experiencing. And in my young mind, I linked those people. Those people were the church for me. They were Jesus for me. Sometimes, especially with our kids now being a parent, we have to really be careful to help explain to our kids that everybody is human. We're all flawed. And even the best intentioned people can do the wrong things. And that doesn't necessarily mean that God is doing that thing. So yeah, that was kind of my background there. And moving on from that, as I got older, you know, I just really started to be more bitter toward the church. Probably around like 16 and 17, I really started focusing in on that hypocrisy that I saw. It really just started to be glaring for me. And then separate from that, I kind of started to be less devoted. You know, I had a lot of responsibilities, a lot of pressure at a really young age, and I was just looking for an escape, and Jesus wasn't it for me at the time. And so, you know, I kind of started getting off the path and trying to find my own way and figure my life out. I was confused about a lot of things, and by the time I got to college, I had completely just removed myself altogether from church. I would say from about 15 to 18, that 3-year point, I just really totally distanced myself.
I want to stop there for a second because I think that's an experience a lot of people have had about people being the reason that they turn away from God, not God being the reason that they turn away from God. And I understand how that can happen. I mean, Jesus saying about the Pharisees, do what they say, not what they do, because they're in the seat of Moses.
Right.
You know, that's an important seat. And they might have the right message, but their actions are not it.
Yeah.
And we still see that, you know, today. And I'm not saying these people were Pharisees, because I think they probably were well-intentioned people. Yeah. But what the devil does is kind of just take what God does and try to pervert it a little bit. That's kind of a message I've been getting a lot lately, is the devil's not really here on his own agenda. He's kind of like dovetailing God and trying to...
Yeah, oh, this good thing God's doing, let me just flip that.
Yeah.
Flip the script on it. Whatever God says, I'm just going to tell. I think we watched that same video.
Yeah. And the people in the church are the people who he probably targets the most, because if he can take a pastor, a church elder, a church leader, and influence them a little bit, that's going to be the most effective way to not just turn them away, not just turn one person away, but to like turn off others, because they have an impact on people seeking Jesus.
I will say too, that church that I grew up at, there were some pastors, namely my youth pastor, who was like a second dad / uncle to me growing up. Pastor Shoni Salas, shout out PT if you are watching. I got you. He was always so incredible and amazing. And I think it was people like that who showed me consistency over time. I mean, I still see him and I still respect him and I still would feel comfortable going to him for spiritual advice, because he has always remained the same, always been very open about his own humanity. And it's those people who, in their consistency, help people like me have kind of like a foothold. Even though, you know, you walk away, you still have kind of that touch tree that you can go back and say, oh yeah, I remember the good things.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, so let's move on a little bit from there. So you go to college.
Yep.
You just kind of fully distance yourself. So how did you go from that like embittered high school student to in your 20s being like, Mom, like literally don't pray for me?
Yeah.
Because you and your mom have very different brands of Christianity. Let me say that also.
Yeah. And her brand of Christianity for the longest time, I hate to say this, Mom, I love you, Mom, but just like icked me because my mom's very woo-woo. My mom is, and she said this, these are her words.
Last night, she was like, I'm a feely woo-woo.
She's a feely woo-woo, and I can appreciate that now.
But dude, the stories and her experiences,
yes,
she was telling me last night how she prayed for healing over a blind girl and she was healed.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, the feely woo-woo has some incredibly powerful stuff.
Exactly.
You know? Like,
exactly.
Yeah. So shout out to those people.
And my mom, I'm sometimes really jealous of her faith because she's not a super academic person. I'm one of those people that needs to gain as much information as I possibly can. If I'm curious about something, I've got to dive in. I've got to learn all the different nuances. I've got to understand the why. If my mom believes in something, she believes. Like, she does not need a ton of proof or anything like that. This is what she believes, and she's going to believe it.
She experienced it.
She's experienced the proof.
Yeah.
And I'm more of a doubting Thomas.
And you hadn't had those experiences.
Right.
You were rationalizing it. Mm-hmm.
So in college, I really started getting interested in world religions and just started doing a lot of research, taking classes. And again, like a lot of people, I started having those feelings of, well, what makes my religion right and everybody else wrong? So I went through that period, and at one point was like, well, I don't even know if I believe in God. I would never have called myself an atheist, more of an agnostic maybe. Like, I knew that there was a higher being, a greater power, but And I never would have said, oh, Jesus wasn't real. That's not based in fact. We know Jesus was real, but I was like, how do we know that Jesus is the Messiah? What if Allah was the Messiah? Or, Muhammad was the Messiah? Or, what if Buddha is who we're supposed to be following, et cetera, et cetera. So then, of course, I started wanting to live the way I wanted to live, not the way God wanted me to live. So I think that also really turned me off to things because, of course, my mom's there in my ear saying, like, turn back to God. Yeah. And like, you're not following Jesus, which is why you're feeling so crappy. And I'm like, typical college kid, like, okay, Mom, give me a break. Like, let me do my own thing. And so, yeah, went through college, got married to a wonderful man who I'm still married to. We've been married
so long.
14 years this year,
That's
together
crazy.
for 17 years. Yeah, wild. And he is Catholic. He grew up Catholic, was always like a very devout Catholic, but not super involved in like the theological stuff. And we never really connected on that level of spirituality. So we just were kind of living our lives and doing our thing. That's
a formula that I experienced, that first doubt of how can we know that this is the right religion? There's so many religions. Doesn't it seem a little arrogant almost that the one we have is the only one?
Yeah, what about we?
What about all those people all over the world who aren't exposed to it?
Right.
That's kind of messed up, right?
Yeah.
And then the next step of, I'm going to live how I want, enjoying living how I want.
Right.
And using that original reason of like, why is this the right religion, as kind of the reason to continue living how I wanted, how we wanted.
Yeah, you find any excuse you can to live how you want.
So then 10 years later, that might still be the thing you say, but what I learned is the reality. I didn't want to give up my way of life. Yep. I wanted to keep living how I was living. So I just thought that was another common experience that we've had.
Yeah.
And I
very accurate.
I imagine that there's probably a lot of people who maybe fall in that boat.
Yeah. And being newly married, I don't know. I feel like I went through a really long period of just trying to figure out who I was, struggling with anxiety, major anxiety, which I had struggled with anxiety pretty much since I was in high school, but really just like not feeling at peace with myself. And I kind of almost adopted that as my personality, like this need to always strive to be better, and I'm never going to be good enough. And so I'll just try to show everyone how good I am all the time. And that external need for validation was kind of filling my Jesus spot.
Your God-shaped hole in your heart.
And it just wasn't doing it for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty profound. I mean, we talk about how we've had similar experiences, but it's crazy to hear that and be like, yo, like that's what I was doing. I was like, I'm going to be really good.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just going to be really, really good.
Yep.
And I'm going to treat people well. Exactly. And people are going to like me, and I'm going to be respectful, and I'm going to work hard, and I'm going to be successful.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to be a respectful, upstanding citizen, you know? And yet I would, drive home at night from work and just almost feel like despair. Like,
That,
like, why do I
feel like this? My life is great.
Yeah, why do I just feel like empty and hollow and just like I'm just missing something? I'm just down.
Yep.
And now I don't ever feel like that. It's like there might be tough things, but it's just like walking around with peace and confidence. And I'm not trying to do things as good as I can possibly do anymore.
Yeah. I used to always like have little sayings around that were like motivational things, like you can't control the wind, and like I don't know, all those weird little like images and memes that you see, and I would like put them as my desktop screensaver at work. And I don't know, I was always trying to like find the thing that was going to make me happy. And now I'm here and it's like, oh well, that was easy.
I was in Ecuador about a year ago at this house party with like a bunch of my buddies was like dating this girl in Ecuador who was like 20, 21 or something, and we went to like her cousin's house party. So there's all these like 20, 21, 22-year-olds, and there I am as I think 28 at the time. And I don't know how it happened, but one of them started asking me questions, and another one started asking me questions, and all of a sudden I was like holding court with like 7, young Ecuadorians asking me about like life and like stuff. And I felt like I was just imparting wisdom and just telling them how to be themselves. And, they saw me as somebody who had like figured it out.
Right.
Like, I left that being like, wow, I've really learned stuff. Like, I'm really being like a good person,
Right.
And still that feeling hadn't gone away. I'm like, I still at the heart, like at the base level was like, but am I a fraud? Like what is there to me? Like I fabricated all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think about that sometimes.
I've had so many similar experiences. I mean, you poor thing, like I'm always trying to impart some kind of wisdom or knowledge on you.
We're watching The Chosen, and Ashley is like, did you know that in 27 AD that this person did this? And I'm like, I'm trying to listen, Ashley.
But this is really important context here.
Did you know that the aqueduct system wasn't invented until...
Do you know if armadillos have really poor eyesight?
That's actually really interesting. And they're leprosy carriers. I didn't know that.
Maybe that's where all the leprosy came from in the Bible. Just armadillos running amok.
Yeah, we need to find the armadillo passage in the Old Testament.
I don't know, where were we?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I kind of cut us off there.
I derailed us with the armadillo.
Yeah, we were derailed.
Oh yeah, feeling like a fraud, like that imposter syndrome. And I used to research that. Like I would hear that and I was like, yes, like I feel that imposter syndrome. And I know so many people of our age range talk about that and go through that. And now I like listen to those things and I'm like, man, if you just dive into Jesus, you won't feel like that. Mikey mentioned we're watching The Chosen, and there's a scene where Mary Magdalene, her faith is shaken, and she kind of runs back to her old ways, and then she eventually comes back to Jesus, and she says, like, I'm so ashamed. I don't know how I can face him. And she comes back anyway, and she's like, I don't know what I can do to ever repay you. And Jesus says, well, you can't. It's like... Oh, okay, well, but that feeling of like being able to release the need to be something all the time and the need for like constantly striving. I'm not saying give up on your goals or whatever, but like the need to strive to have meaning in your life and to have purpose is not there for me anymore. If I want to accomplish something or do something, whether it's as a mom, in my career, as a wife, whatever it is, I'm doing it because I want to do it, not because I feel like it's going to fill a gap in my soul now. That's really freeing. And speaking of the little sayings, my mom gave me this little plaque that I have by my coffee pot. And I feel like I can actually do what it says. And it says, let whatever you do today be enough. And I can actually get to the end of my day and feel like if I was reading my Bible and I was praying and I was being Jesus to other people, whether it's my kid, people that I come across in the grocery store, whatever it is, it's like, I've done enough today. It's great to be able to lay down at night and not feel like that rat race feeling.
Yeah. Oh, half my to-do list didn't get done. It was a failure of the day.
Yeah, so I'm a failure. Yeah. No, you're not. You've done everything that you need to do just by following him. And
it's been really cool. Like I love waking up in the morning and seeing you at this desk right here, like with the lamp on, like reading the Bible. And I go sit out here and reading the Bible and starting the day like that. For me, it brings peace, you know. Put on the armor of God. I go through my little thing. I'm like, the belt of truth. Yeah. The breastplate of righteousness. Okay. The shoes of the gospel of peace.
Yeah.
Actually, I had just some clarity on the shoes of the gospel of peace. I don't know what I thought I was putting on my feet, but
Sorry. I don't know what I thought I was putting on my feet.
Literally yesterday, I thought about the peace of Jesus. You think about like the peace we try to like bring into this world. I always fashion myself a peacemaker, a mediator. I try to keep the peace in friendships, families, or whatever. But like the peace that Jesus offers is like a lot deeper, more profound, long-lasting. And that's what the shoes of the gospel of peace represent. That like every step you take is to rest in like Jesus's peace. Like, I don't know. That just, I never stopped to consider how impactful that was.
Yeah.
So.
That's awesome. I never thought about that either. Yeah. Thanks for sharing.
Of course. Of course.
Wait, before we jump back in,
Yes.
I just want to say one quick thing. So I'm really excited to be doing this today because one of my unspoken New Year's resolutions was to be like more open about my faith and my journey, because it's like I'm in this little bubble of our family where I'm like talking about it a ton, but like outside of our bubble, I don't talk to that many people, let's be honest, but I'm not like proclaiming my faith. So this is like my first like outward, hey everybody, check out this journey I'm on. Yeah. It's pretty interesting. So thank you for helping me to fulfill a New Year's resolution that I haven't told anyone about.
You're so welcome. That means a lot to me. I'm on a similar journey to you, and
but I feel like you're out there like shouting it from the rooftops.
I'm trying to.
Yeah.
It's that verse, I think it's in Galatians 1:10. Paul writes, "For do I now persuade men or God? Do I seek to please men? For if I yet please men, I should not be the servant of Christ." I've just been trying to be really cognizant that I'm a servant of God. Whatever happens, whatever man thinks, if my heart is right with the Lord, if my intentions are right with God, that's number one. I also pray that, like, Lord, if I ain't right, like, if I'm wrong, like, please show me, like, correct me. Because, I'm sure there's many instances where we're not even realizing where we might be wrong. Like the lady who was shouting at you to speak in tongues, you know? She might have thought that she was, doing a great work for the Lord and motivating you to, connect with God.
Leading the next generation.
Right. That could have been her perspective. Yeah. So I think it's really easy to be clouded. So that's why we just got to keep seeking the Lord.
Yeah.
Because He's at hand. So we've kind of started at the beginning, and actually we've kind of gone to like the end a little bit, talking about where you are now. But in the middle there was a conversion, because you said you are somebody who has doubts, has questions, needs some proof, needs to see. And there's a lot of proof out there in the form of prophecies and in the Word and historical evidence, but there's nothing like experiencing the relational God moving today in the real world. So can we go to maybe where you were 2021, 2022?
Fast forward to about 2 years ago, our family started going through a really difficult time.
What were your emotions when that stuff was happening?
I felt hopeless. I felt like, how can I ever get out of this? How can we ever get out of this? How can we survive this? I had a 18-month-old at the time. My mom was there, for us as a family during that time. And, talking to my mom about it now, she was like, I knew in my heart, like, this was the turning point for you to come back to God, So she was really like trying to get me into church and trying to get me to acknowledge that, like, I needed God during this time, because that was the only thing that was going to get me through. I just wasn't ready. I wasn't ready. And I was trying. That's the thing. Like, I was going to church with my mom.
What do you think was holding you back?
I think just that the feeling of absolute overwhelm and not having experienced God in any real way for so long, you forget the things that God can do in your life. And like, you just think, no one can fix this. So why am I even bothering? I've got so many things that I've got to worry about right now. Like, the last thing I have time for is like praying and wasting my time doing this when I don't even know if it's going to work. Also, I think my bitterness toward the church was still really creeping in. But in the few years leading up to that, I would go to church on occasion, or like, my mom's always blaring worship music. Always. Like, you go into her house and it's like, we are going to church. Worship would make me really emotional for a long period of time. Part of that was like an underlying shame. Part of it maybe was like the Holy Spirit trying to draw me back.
Shame for leaving God?
Yeah, I think so. I can't really pinpoint what it is, but like there were some times where I would just start crying if I would hear a worship song, and I'm like, why am I crying? Like, but not in like I'm overcome with the Holy Spirit, like that feeling of really deep embarrassment, which is why I think it was shame, where it's like you're almost cringing. You want to just like fold in on yourself because you feel like totally icked.
Like Mary, who didn't want to go back to Jesus.
That's exactly it. That feeling like I can't face him. During this really difficult time, I remember going into church and like dreading the worship part. So I would like drag my feet and stall so that we would be like late to church. I have to be in the worship part. But I'm like, well, I have an 18-month-old, so like, if I'm late, I'm late. Like, it's not my fault. I've got a baby. Through this time, I can look back now and say we started to experience miracles as a family. Things that people said were impossible were happening for us, and things were turning around at like a really rapid rate, and God healed our family.
Were you praying? Were you?
I was praying like out of a desperation, but not expecting to hear anything.
Yeah.
And then prayers would get answered, and my mom would be like, see, and I was like, nah, that's just, I would just kind of like brush it off, like it's not really, it's just like hard work on our part as a family that's getting us to this place. And I was like listening to worship music at that point. She was like sending me all these Spotify playlists, all her worship Spotify playlists. And so I had two girlfriends, shout out Mia and Kayla, I love you girls, who were just so instrumental in taking care of our family during that time. Like I said, both of them are really strong in their faith, but not pushy with me, not saying like, oh, you got to pray about this, or you got to, maybe Kayla a little bit more than Mia. Like, you gotta pray. We're praying for you. Still, I was like, yeah, okay. Like, I appreciate it. Like, I could accept it at that point. I kind of got past my, like, don't pray for me. But I was like, okay, I have other people praying for me, and like, I'll pray, but like, I don't think it's going to do anything if I pray. So we started experiencing these miracles. We started healing as a family, and still I just like was not ready to accept the full like re-entry into my faith. Then I would say the beginning of last year, I just really started to like feel, I hate to use like religious jargon. It drives me crazy, but I'm going to do it, like a stirring in my spirit. That's another thing that really irks me is religious jargon, but a stirring in my spirit where I was like, I wanted to start exploring my Christian faith again. And I think my life had kind of gotten into a smoother period, and I was feeling more confident in my relationships, my role as a mom, my place in my career. So I was like at a solid point, not a great point, but I just felt like things were kind of smooth, things were okay. So I think in that regard, it's kind of interesting because a lot of people turn to God when they're like in crisis, and I just like, I couldn't, because I was so deep in my crisis, and it took me kind of God showing himself to me, even though I didn't accept or really believe it or truly see it at that time. It was still there in my mind that I could reference back and say, oh wow, you know, God did really do a work in our family. So the beginning of the year, I remember having a conversation with my friend Kayla saying, you know, I'm wanting to get back into church, and I'm enjoying going, because I had started going fairly regularly with my mom's church, but I am so hesitant because I don't know what my brand of Christianity is, what my brand of faith is. And I don't resonate with my mom's brand of faith. And that was like the most prevalent version of faith that was obvious in my life. And I just like didn't resonate with that. And I was like, I don't want to model my own walk with God after anyone else, but I don't know how to figure out how to get there. And she's like, all I can tell you is like, just start reading the word and just start praying. Just like start there and don't have any expectations of yourself. So that was a really powerful conversation. Sure, our kids were like running around like feral wildlings at the time, but it was impactful for me at that moment. And I just kind of was dabbling in reading the Bible a little bit and like exploring what version of the Bible I wanted to read. I'd never even considered that before.
Yeah.
Figuring out what works for me, not basing what I'm doing on what anybody else is doing, because I was really quiet about it. I didn't tell anyone that I was doing it, which I think was really important for me too, was to like totally explore it on my own, because I'm really susceptible to people pleasing and wanting to do things the way people tell me I should do them if I respect those people. So I knew I needed to kind of be on this journey on my own. So I think that conversation was maybe in January.
2024?
Yeah, last year. And fast forward to May, and we're at my uncle's wedding. My mom's cousin, who I love and adore, Tara.
Oh my gosh, shout out Tara. We love you so much.
We love you. So she just like randomly pulls me aside, and we're like partying at this point. She pulls me aside and she's like, hey, do you have a minute to chat? I've got a word for you. And Tara is known for this. Like, she just has a gift and God gives her things and messages. And let me really quickly back up and say our grandmother, my mom's stepmom, who Mikey and I consider our grandmother, passed in 2010, and I was very, very close to her, and she was Jesus in our family. She was always so devoted in her faith and just the kindest, sweetest, most loving person you'd ever meet in your life, but she was always in her word. I mean, my mom has her Bible, and she's just got like notes and notes and notes and notes on everything, and you can see that she just read that Bible and renotated. So fast forward, Tara comes over to me and she said, God, I feel like gave me a message for you, and I don't know where you are in your walk with God right now. I don't know anything about your Christian faith, if you're even still in your Christian faith, but your grandma, Sherry, is in heaven interceding for you. And she, did I not tell you this? I thought I told you this.
I just got like chills in my face.
She's in heaven interceding for you, and she wants you to remember the things that she taught you. And she's like, I don't know if that means anything to you. Are you?
That's crazy.
Yeah. I don't know if that means anything to you. I don't know if that's relevant in your life right now, but like, that's all I got. I just started sobbing.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay. And still, I was still sort of in that like stalled out spot of like dabbling and figuring out. And I was like, all right, something here. All I could say to her was like, I really needed that. Thank you. And she was like, okay. Then fast forward again to maybe a month later, I went on a work trip and was chatting with my colleague, Hannah, who I love and adore. And she's very open about her faith as a Christian. I think like the first time I ever met or talked to her, like I knew she was a Christian right away, but she's like super cool and chill and like kind of a hippie and a traveler. And she's just like, if you want to be like a cool Christian, she's just like, be like Hannah, right?
She's doing it.
So we're just chatting, and she's just kind of like always open to chat about your spiritual life. And I was sharing with her my journey, where I was at, and she was just giving me some really good advice about things that I was struggling with, things I had questions about. And it was just like a really solid conversation. I couldn't tell you the details of it, but I just remember walking away from that conversation feeling like, okay, there's clearly something happening here. I've had all of these experiences. I got to get serious about this, because I can't ignore all of these things.
Yeah. I
started digging in at that point. Like around that time, my mom had sent me the Bible app, which I love. If you're not on the Bible app, check it out. It's amazing. And so I was like exploring Bible reading plans and starting to get in a really good cadence of like daily study. It was almost like a fun thing for me to start doing. It was like this new learning
It's actually really interesting.
Yeah, I did that. And at the time, I was also, trying to get pregnant with a second baby. I didn't even mention, I should have mentioned this way earlier, but back a couple years ago when our family went through a really tough time, I started vaping.
Like a fiend.
And I was kind of always a smoker on and off. I loved to smoke cigarettes. Like, if there were no health implications, I'd be just lighting up all the time. I just love it. I love it. And it's horrible for you. It's like the worst thing you can do.
Not good.
Not good. But I started vaping because I have a toddler and I don't want to be blowing smoke around him. And I wasn't vaping in front of people. So it was like this. Not only was it horrible for myself, but then I'm also doing this thing secretively.
You're like, Mission Impossible. How will I vape today?
Yeah, because I don't want my kid to see it. I'm ashamed of it because I know my family would judge the heck out of me. Yeah. Anytime I ever smoked, my mom knew I smoked. My mom would be like, "Oh my God, you're smoking!" And I also work in the natural health industry, so that adds a layer of shame on top of it. We're seeing a through line here about shame in my life. I kept trying to quit. And
what did you do to try to quit?
Everything. When I say everything, I was I bought all the, smoking cessation things, patches, gum, everything that you can buy. If my husband is listening, I will not say the amount of money that I probably have spent on those things.
Just to quit smoking.
Just to quit. Not even counting all the vapes. And I would throw my vapes away and then I would go buy new ones. So it was just a lot of money that I was wasting on this terrible habit. And I would successfully quit for 2 weeks, a week. And then I would just be so overcome by both psychological and physical cravings. I would just start vaping again.
What's that feeling like after a week of quitting and then that first vape back?
Oh, it's so good. It's so good. You get a little head buzz and you're just yeah. That's what I was missing.
If anybody's doubting that we have a true
addict on our hands. Here we are. So yes, then finally I was you know what? I'll be able to quit when I get pregnant. My willpower will be strong enough. So
you just kept vaping?
I just kept vaping. The day I found out I was pregnant, I woke up in the morning and I didn't know at the time I was pregnant. So I'm vaping, having my coffee, doing some work on the computer. And I had been taking pregnancy tests and everything. I just kept not being pregnant. So I just didn't assume I'd be pregnant. And then I look at it and it's positive and I'm oh shoot, I gotta quit. Then I'm going through the day and still vaping. And I'm every time I do it, I'm what is wrong with me? I know I'm carrying this life and I'm endangering this life by doing this thing. Why don't I have the self-control and the willpower to just stop? I was started justifying it to myself. Typical addict behavior. Well, a lot of people don't find out they're pregnant until they're 6 or 8 weeks along. So I could not even know right now. So I'm just going to keep. And I'm you know what? No. And so that night I was laying in bed and I said a prayer. And I will also say that, at this point I had been in my word and praying, but praying was a lesser thing to me. It was more that desire for knowledge, not really exercising my faith as much. So I was laying in bed and I was you know what, God, I need your help with this. Obviously, I need your help. I can't quit this on my own. I need you to help me quit. So when I wake up in the morning, I not only need you to help me quit, and give me the willpower, but I also need you not to give me any side effects. I'm giving God my list of demands because God, I'm a mom and I have a 2.5-year-old and I can't be cranky and grumpy and tired and, hungry all the time and all the things that
What are the side effects?
All those things. I was so grumpy and cranky anytime I would quit. I couldn't sleep. I was starving. I was exhausted.
So you said, take away my desire for this?
My desire for this.
And I want there to be no repercussions.
And I don't want to suffer at all. Please. Thank you. So I was God, if you're real, basically I was testing. Like, do not test the Lord your God. Well, God, this is a test for you. I'm going to need you to come through for me here. So I woke up the next morning, and morning time was like ultimate crave time because, you know, your vape and your coffee, and that's just like beautiful. I woke up and I'm like waiting for that feeling to hit. And it was like I would walk out of my bedroom and be like right on the vape as I'm brewing my coffee. I'm like not having a craving. And I'm like, okay. So I'm like going through my day and realizing like I feel fine. No cravings, no crankiness. I thought about it, and this was an interesting separation. So typically anytime I would think about it, I would also have like a simultaneous craving for it. So I was thinking about it as frequently on the clock. Typically when a craving would hit, I'd have the thought about it and like, okay, here we go. So I would think about it, but I wouldn't have that attached craving. And it was almost like that was my reminder to like thank God for, again, here's some religious jargon, delivering me from my addiction. And interestingly enough, fast forward, so that was August 14th to now, I still pretty regularly think, ooh, a vape would be really nice right now. But I don't have that attached physical craving. I take that as my prayer reminder.
Yeah.
Where I can just like really quickly say, thank you, God, for, you know, giving me this life that I have now and showing yourself to me. But it was totally wild to sit back, even now, to sit back and think how many times I had tried to do it on my own. I mean, so I tried all the smoking cessation stuff. I even was like listening to stop smoking podcasts, like hypnosis stuff, like binaural beats in certain frequencies to help me quit smoking. I mean, literally everything. Like my typical research brain was like, I could tell you 100 ways that people tell you can stop smoking. Like go for a run every time you have a craving. I tell you, I tried everything.
Wow.
And to wake up one morning and just like not crave it anymore was amazing. So that really was my turning point where I was like, okay, that wasn't a God wink. That was what we call a spacey slap.
And you want to tell the people what a spacey slap is? Spacey.
Space cat. I have a cat who is a very interesting little creature. But if she doesn't like something you're doing, she will often just smack you right in the middle of your forehead. She does it to my son a lot because he does a lot of things that she doesn't like. Just a pop right in the middle of the forehead. So yeah, I got a spacey slap to the forehead, and she can hear we're talking about her. She's meowing. She's meowing from across the room.
That's crazy.
So since then, I just kind of dug in. I was like, all right, God proved himself to me. And now it's my job to thank him for that and just love him for the sake of loving him. Like that God calling we read yesterday. It's like, love me just for me.
Yeah.
And I think my goal in all of this is try to keep it in the forefront of my mind, because we as humans are so forgetful of the good things that God does in our lives. Like we were talking about the other day, watching The Chosen, and you know, the disciples witness Jesus doing all these miraculous things, and then they'll be like, we're out of food, what are we gonna do? And Jesus is like, you've literally seen me heal people that have never walked before, and you're worried about how much food we have? But yeah, now, you know, looking back over the last 2 years where I am now, I can see the really, truly miraculous things that God has done in our lives and as a family, to see where we are now. Not just me, myself, but as a family unit. You know, we're going to church together. We're, as husband and wife, talking to our son on a daily, sometimes multiple times per day basis of reading the Bible with Santi and praying with him, and now getting to see him experience miracles for himself. Like last night,
He had a prayer answered last night.
He had a prayer answered. Should I share this story?
Yes. Spider-Man was
But even those things, well, let me tell the story first. We have been looking for this Spider-Man vehicle.
Is it here somewhere?
It is somewhere. Yes, I can see it. It's in the middle of the living room. Right by the puzzle.
It's a pretty cool toy.
Let me use this as my object lesson. So we have been looking for this Spidey vehicle for at least a week. It was at my mom's, or so we thought. We thought it was there, could not find it. We've been searching and searching. My mom's like, it's got to be at your house or in your car. So I came home, searched high and low, looked everywhere for this stinking vehicle.
It's not there.
Not there. Santi's been looking for it. So we went back to my mom's yesterday, and he's like, Grandma, help me look for my Spidey vehicle. They're looking and looking, and my mom says to him, you know, Santi, when I lose stuff and I can't find it, I just pray that God will help me find it. So they said a prayer really quickly, and I'm sitting outside with Mikey, and I said, you know, I really pray and hope that God answers this prayer for him right now so that he can see a miracle for like his first, I don't know if you can call it a miracle.
He can experience an answered prayer.
Experience an answered prayer, right? Within 3 minutes.
So fast.
So fast. He found this vehicle, and it was like, when I tell you we looked everywhere, and it was just like at the bottom of this bag of other toys that we never put it in. And not only did he find this Spidey vehicle, he's found his other Spider-Man Hot Wheels car with this one. So like the Lord doubled down on his answer to prayer. Like, you're looking for one Spidey vehicle? I'm going to give you two. It was like the story of God, you know, separating the loaves of bread and the fish for the 5,000. And then they had 12 baskets of uneaten food at the end. Like, it was
we had a Spidey car left over.
Spidey car left over. It was amazing. And he was like, God answered my prayer. God answered my prayer. And then he's telling everyone, and it's almost even more impactful for me to see my kids' prayer answered than my own.
I don't want to speak for God, but I can only imagine the joy he probably gets answering a 3-year-old's prayer. You know?
I know. Well, the wild thing about it is that my mom had looked in this bag in this 3 minutes that it took them between the prayer and the finding of the toy. She looked in the bag and said, oh, it's not in here. Closed the bag. And Santi said, I think it's in that bag. And he dumped the whole thing out, and it was at the bottom of the bag. So like, not only did he answer God answered his prayer in finding it, but like God led him. It wasn't like my mom found it. It was God leading him to find it, which was wild. So thank you. That was awesome. Great work. Yeah. So that's my story.
That is great. Clap, 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 clap. Thank you so much for coming on, Ashley. This has been so fun. I want to look up one verse to send
While you're
this
doing
out
that,
to.
I want to say one more thing.
Please do.
For parents, I know my mom, God bless her, she really tries not to make a big deal out of my journey that she sees me on, but I know she's like pumped about it because now she's like talking to me and sending me all these things, and she's just like excited to be able to share this walk with me now. For parents out there whose kids might be on like a similar path and like may have wandered, just be encouraged and know that your prayers aren't going unheard, and they might not be ready. There may be something that God's trying to teach them. You know, just keep on keeping on, and it will work out. This is going to be the mascot for the show.
Spidey-Man.
This is actually not Spidey-Man.
Is that Miles?
This is Spin. Yeah, Miles.
Spin from the show?
Yes.
I've learned so much about children's TV shows.
Oh, yeah.
That's got to be one of my favorite. We should watch more VeggieTales.
We should. You should also play for your listeners Bigger Than the Boogeyman remix.
The remix? The remix is fire. That came on today. On the topic of what you just said, Psalm 34:17, the Lord hears his people when they call to him for help. He rescues them from all their troubles. Mm-hmm. And then a verse on your experience, 2 Corinthians 12:9. This is Paul writing about Jesus. Each time he said, my grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness. So now I am glad to boast about my weaknesses so that the power of Christ can work through me.
Mm-hmm. That's so true. It was through my weakness, my immense weakness, and my lack of power to overcome it that brought me to where I'm at.
Praise the Lord.
The Lord is at hand.
God is bigger than the Boogeyman remix.
Oh, here we go.
It's great to be here. Here's a little tune we laid down for the first time back in
1993.
Are you scared? You shouldn't be.
Shouldn't be scared.
Are you scared? He's bigger than Godzilla or the
Monsters on TV.
Santi was like a little thrown off by this version. Until the chorus came in, he was like... And then he heard the familiar words and he was like, oh, okay, yeah.
Okay, I can get into this.
All right, we're going to keep listening to VeggieTales hits, but to anyone who has made it this far, thank you so much for following along. You can check us out on Facebook. We are The Lord is at Hand. These are on YouTube, on Spotify. We have an Instagram. Thanks for listening. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Jesus.
Yes, thank you.
For guiding our conversation. Thank you, Spidey, for being here. And we will talk to you next time.
Bye.